Hello, and welcome to another edition of Straight Talk with Don Chioffi. This is the second part of an introductory program for the benefit of the taxpayers of this county, and actually the taxpayers of the entire state. And I have with me my two guests, Terry Williams and Neil Robinson, who is actually the director of Ho Ho Ho. And as we discussed in the previous program, we're talking to you, the taxpayer, about something that's probably one of the most important financial decisions that you could possibly ever make for the future of not only yourselves, but your children and your grandchildren, because educational taxes in this state are breaking the bank. They're breaking your bank, they're breaking my bank, they're breaking the state's bank. And everybody seems to throw up their hands and say, yeah, but what are we going to do about it? Well, you know where it starts? Look in the mirror, because it starts with you. And when you look in that mirror and say, it starts with me, your next question is, what do I do? How can a little guy or a little gal like me affect the property taxation for education in the whole state of Vermont? Well, Neil and a whole group of people that he's working with, and more of them will be on the program as we do future editions. And he enlisted the help of Terry, because Terry has a lot of municipal experience as well as a lot of statewide experience, have developed a committee that's working on the simplest and yet the most meaningful solution to this problem of educational funding in the state of Vermont. Some people think that it's a monumental task, and guess what? You're right, it is. But if enough people get behind a method of funding education that will produce, at the very least, a 40 to 50% reduction in your personal property taxes to fund education, think of what this will mean on your tax bill. Take your tax bill and look at the educational portion, and then take half of that away and see what it amounts to. In most cases, it's anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 to up to $3,000 or $4,000 in the case of high-end properties. That's half of what you pay in educational taxes. And you say to yourself, how could I possibly get that much reduction in my taxes? That's what this program is devoted to, and right now we're going to get into that discussion, and I'll let Neil start off with the simplest taxes, the best, and that'll be a slide that'll basically tell you what the intent of this program is, and it may undergo many changes. Understand this, and I can give some perspective to this because I've been there. I've been there in that legislature, and I can tell you that it isn't simple. Our legislators that represent you have got to buy into this concept first before it would even have a chance of succeeding. They have to buy into the concept that there's something we have to do to reduce the burden on the property taxpayer in the state of Vermont. Now, once they buy into that, then the question is, how do we go about it? And there are many, many, many solutions. So it isn't something that Neil is going to present and it's going to be exactly that. It's probably not going to be exactly that. It'll undergo many metamorphoses. But I think you can get the idea of where the committee is headed and what the basic elements of reduction of your taxes are. So if you want to go explain slide one, Neil,
Thank you, Don. Yes, we're talking about a 1% flat tax on all financial transactions. And the buyer pays the tax. So this tax would be on everything. Now, as Don said, that whole thing could change at the legislative level if we're successful. But at least it's getting it off the property taxes back. And again, we're talking about homeowners, both residential and second homeowners. The interesting thing about this whole thing, I used to think that, well, you know, when you sit around a coffee and talk about this thing, everybody identifies with the property taxes going up. And we always thought that maybe we're alone in this sort of thing. How many are like us out there? Well, in the year 2016, there was a commission poll done by Vermont Public Radio. And I don't know who commissioned it, and I don't care who did, but it must have had something to do with the legislature. And it was all about trust in government. And it asked two questions. What kind of trust did the person taking the poll have with municipal government, and what kind of trust did they have in state government? Well, lo and behold, it came back, 78% of the respondents did not trust their municipal government, and 89% didn't trust the state government. Well, that immediately told me, wow, there's a whole bunch of people out there like us that are frustrated. And granted, they probably had frustrations about other things, but I'm sure at the core of that were a whole bunch of property tax people. And incidentally, that was given to Senator Jeanette White of the Senate Government Operations Committee, and she formed an ethics committee. Well, folks, have you heard anything about it since?
Not a word.
That's why we're here.
Not a word.
Not a word. And incidentally, I have to make reference, and with all due respect, the information that we have in front of us on the simplest tax goes back to Phil Stannard, who ran on that as governor way back, and frankly, it was dismissed. But those were under different circumstances, different times, and we are now in a totally different time today. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Terry, you know, you're presently serving on the select board, correct?
I am.
And to give a perspective of what this means and how it interacts and what you have to deal with sitting in those long and sometimes arduous board meetings that never get enough coverage. And quite frankly, I will say to you, because I've been there before, and a lot of our good people out here listening, you know, you all have select boards, and they're really unsung heroes, because they're some of the fewest people that we have that are actually working to keep your taxes as low as they can. And I'll let you speak to that, because you're sitting there and I'm not.
Well, I'm speaking as a taxpayer now, because I really can't speak for the select board, but as I got into the budget process, working with the town manager for Poultney, I realized that we have a 70% tax increase that's actually going to go to education tax in Poultney. And I couldn't believe it. I went back and I started looking into the budget process at the state level. And last year, before the end of the legislative session, I found that there was a $4.5 billion unfinanced requirements list, and most of that was state employee and teacher retirement funds. So not only do we have to pay the taxes we have to pay right now, but we also have to look forward to paying additional taxes or find another way to offset that unfinanced requirements list. You know, we have to stand up before the town on pre-town meeting day in Poultney and justify to the taxpayers why their taxes are going to go up 4.5% year after year after year. And I think that the education funding issue is one that kind of gets overlooked. Now, everybody has friends and relatives that are teachers, and I do too. So nobody's going to try and throw the teachers under the bus, but I think we need to find a different way to fund education because the student population continues to go down. The people are either leaving the state or dying, and the people that are actually paying the taxes diminish every year. And eventually, the golden goose is going to be gone.
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting. It really is quite interesting that you bring that particular subject up because recently on a local call-in program, Mr. Philbin had that subject and brought that very, very subject up. And there was quite a heated discussion about exactly that. Of course, his point was that you can't run a business that's losing customers by adding employees. And of course, everybody out there is saying, well, that seems logical. And his point was that you just can't do this. This is not a model that will produce any success. As a matter of fact, it won't produce any success at all. Anyone that's run a business knows that as you increase your business and your customers increase, you have to increase production, and then you have to increase sales, and then you have to increase employees to take care of the sales. But if you're going the other way, you don't hire more employees when you have less customers. Well, my point was that this is true only if it's a business, but education is not run as a business. And the excuse that's always given is, well, we can't run it as a business because it's for the kids. It's for the kids. Well, you know, I don't mean to trivialize the fact that we're trying to do the best for our children and our students in this society, but to use that as an excuse every single time we raise the taxes and raise the number of, lower the student-teacher ratio so that now we're at 9 or 10 kids per teacher in the school system. Stop and think of what this means. Back in my day, because I was in education for a while, 17 years, and I know things change in society, demographics and socioeconomics and attitudes and so forth. But people are still people are still people. And I had 35 kids in my classroom when I first started. A self-contained 6th grade classroom, 35 kids. There was discipline in the classroom, the parents backed us up. But I didn't have any problem with 35 kids. Now you're talking 10 kids per teacher in the school system. That's 3.5 times the cost just based on the student-teacher ratio. If we get any lower than 10, we might as well go to the Greek and Roman concept where we had individual tutors. And that's what happened. That's how people were taught back in those days, is those that were wealthy enough to afford it had an individual scholar that was hired to work with the kids in old Greek and Roman times. And they taught them the classics, they taught them computation, they taught them astrology, astronomy, anything you could think of. And the concept was pretty clear. And that was that in order to be that teacher, in order to be that kind of an educator that could work with a student one-on-one, you had to be knowledgeable about your subject matter. As a matter of fact, you had to be, I wouldn't say at the genius level, but you had to be fantastically educated about your subject matter, and then you would impart that knowledge to that individual student on a one-to-one basis. No distractions, no classroom disruptions, nothing. Just you and me. And if I were this Greek and Roman educator, it's just you and me, son or lady. It's just you and me, and we're going out on an educational field trip today, or we're going to be looking at some scholarly works, or we're going to be looking at the astrological charts, and you're going to learn this stuff. And the concept was pretty simple from a teacher's point of view, and it was simple, and I don't mean to be egotistical about it, because I'm not. The point is, I'm the teacher, you're the student. I'm here to impart my knowledge to you, and you're here to learn it. We have so many hundreds of thousands of distractions to that model today that it's amazing. But getting back to the point that you made, Terry, I don't think the people understand how hard it is for a select board member or any person that's elected to serve the citizens to sit down and try to make those kinds of decisions as to what do you cut, what can you not raise. How many times, and I ask you this because you're listening to this program, all of you people out there that are listening right now, how many times have you asked yourself, when does a tax ever go down? When does the cost of living ever go down? These people that I'm talking to right now and that are here on this program and that are working with a whole group are working to do that. And I want you to ask yourself how many people in this world that you know that are in elective office or representative office with your best interest at heart are working to lower your burden. And if you can come up with an answer that's better than this one, then I'm telling you, Neil Robinson wants to hear from you. Terry Williams wants to hear from you. Because this can be done. And let's look at this simplest tax is best again with a second slide, because it tells you just how much money is available here. You got an idea, Terry, how much this can do?
I don't have the facts, I don't have the figures, but I can tell you from looking at the select board and the services that we provide, we have to decide whether we're gonna replace an aging truck that is used to plow the roads, or if we're gonna pay additional education funding.
Next.
And it's difficult
Simple.
when people are complaining to the select board all the time about the condition of the roads, and the state aid to highways funding that's coming in is inadequate to maintain those roads. So we have to make some stark decisions. I've never seen an education budget go down in the town of Poultney. I'm 68 years old. And what they'll do is, I actually did see one go down some years ago, but after 4 votes, they finally got it approved because people just got tired of coming to the polling place. And
Right.
It's, and I can only speak from that experience I've got. But there is a better way to fund it. With your input, we're gonna find out how to do that.
Well, you're at least you're working hard at it, Terry. You know, somebody's got to be working at how to try to do this, and it's a monumental task. It's just, I mean, it's not like you don't have other things to do on that select board. You got to run a whole town, and at the same time, you're looking at a budget, and the thing that gets me is that this tax escalation thing is so unending. You've got towns that are raising the educational tax. Rutland City just raised it. I think there was 12.6 or 12.7% overall increase in the educational tax. But they're a receiving town, so they get a lot of help from people like us, which is nice. I mean, that's nice. We have to pay a little bit for their education as well. That's one of the reasons that the citizens, a lot of citizens throughout the state of Vermont that are in the, quote, poor towns, the large municipalities like Burlington, like Rutland, like Brattleboro, they don't have to be that concerned when they go to the polls about raising taxes, because they're getting a lot of money from the rich towns. So out of their budget, they may be getting 20, 30, 40% or more of that budget paid for by somebody else. It's always easy to spend somebody else's money. A lot harder if it was your own. And when the state does these taxes and takes them the way they have done from the local people, anytime taxation, funding, and budgeting gets further and further away from the people that are actually paying it, that's when things get out of control. They really do. In other words, local government is always the best government because local government is the one that's in touch with the people. I don't know where it can end because the tax increases are always greater than the inflationary rate. And if it's greater than the inflationary rate, then how are people to keep up with this? We know we're losing people in the state of Vermont. We're losing population. So it's fewer and fewer people that are being required to pay a higher and higher tax. This is not a problem that ends well. It can't continue that way. And I really think the legislature knows that in their heart of hearts. I don't know how they could not know that. You can't continue to have budgetary increases that are not in line with the people's ability to pay, especially when you have a net outflow of people in your state.
I think Governor Scott realizes that because I listened to his State of the State address, and he was appealing to the legislators that we got to stop increasing taxes to pay for some of the unfinanced requirements we've got.
Right.
If we can keep things at an even par as people go out the door, we don't. Not only are we losing people, but we're losing businesses. I mean, drive down the Route 4, Woodstock Avenue in the city of Rutland, and look at all the empty storefronts, and those are your tax base.
Right.
So when they don't have the businesses helping to support the tax base, it gets turned to the taxpayers.
Well, Neil, your town, as a matter of fact, was just in the news today. As a matter of fact, your town of Fairhaven is putting in front of the people this March at the March town election. They're putting in a proposition to adopt a 1% option tax, which has been allowed by the state. I think originally that tax was meant to be used only by poor towns that were actually gold towns that were contributing. I don't know whether that's changed or whatever. I'm not making a judgment about that. But what I am making a judgment about, because it's key to what you're trying to do, is that the 1% is the amount. It's interesting that it's a 1% amount, and the state has already decided this way back when they did Act 68. They said, well, we're going to try to equalize the educational opportunity, but it's going to be painful to the rich towns because we're going to have to tax them some more money so that we can give it to the poor towns so that they can come up to the plate. Now, that's a nice concept. But they felt bad, not quite bad enough, but they felt bad about poor towns, poor rich towns like Rutland Town. Because you see, the problem with a rich town definition is this. Towns aren't rich or poor. It's people that are rich or poor. So there's always poor people in rich towns. So how do they get treated? The legislature, in their wisdom, knew this. So what they did was they developed this 1% option tax, because taxing authority at the state level belongs to the state alone. So municipalities couldn't do this. The sales tax is defined in statute as being a state tax. So municipalities did not have the right to tax people to pay for education unless the state gave them that right. So the state did. They said, we're going to develop this 1% options tax, and you can vote on it locally. You rich towns can vote on this locally, and it will supplement the amount that you have to pay as a penalty to the state of Vermont. That's what that was developed for. Now it's kind of morphed into more towns. Brandon, I think, wanted to develop, I don't know whether they did or not, but Brandon was talking about developing it. And now your town, Neil, is talking about letting the people vote on this town meeting day. And as the article said, there were a lot of people that said, oh, I don't know, it's going to be bad for business. Hey, they said the same thing in Rutland Town when I first proposed this, and it went down to defeat. Well, then the taxes started going up and up and up in the town, a reappraisal, and then it went up even more. Then I went back to the select board and I said, well, don't you think it's time we take a look at this again? We need the money. And well, let's put it this way. I was very persuasive, and I was very persistent, and I didn't give in. And I pushed and pushed and pushed, And I finally got them, I said, look, let the people decide. And they did. The select board was good about it, and they did. They put it all on the budget, on the ballot, and the people adopted it like 2-1. That option tax, now I know Rutland Town has a lot of industry and a lot of businesses and so forth. That option tax brings $1.1 million into the town of Rutland. And your people in Fairhaven, if they adopt this, it's going to be others that are going to pay the tax. Yes, you're going to pay 1% on sales tax on goods and so forth and so on. But that 1% is not going to be noticed. You won't notice it. I mean, nobody says, oh gosh, I'm not going to go to that store because I'm going to pay 1% more. Who's going to do that? You go and you're going to pay. However, somebody coming from Castleton, or somebody coming from Rutland, or somebody coming from New York State, somebody going through there, buying gas, buying this, buying that, they're going to pay the 1% tax too. So a lot of the 1% money that's paid into the town of Fairhaven, for instance, is going to be paid by people that don't live in Fairhaven. So it's going to be a shared burden. And my point is, if we could raise $1.1 million, how much can you raise? I don't know, 200, 300,000, 400,000, I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it's going to reduce your municipal tax burden by that much. And it's 1%, and that's key. So why don't you tell people, Neil, what this tax proposal will do with the, we go to slide number 3 here, the last one.
Yeah, it shows that this tax replaces all taxes. Does away with property taxes, income taxes, existing sales taxes. All a citizen pays is 1%. That will boost the individual purchasing power that will strengthen the economy. It will encourage individual investment. Think about what it'll do for home sales. It'll make a home more affordable. It'll help construction. It'll help realtors. It'll help people in the trades. It's a win-win situation. And another thing I'd like to bring to the table is this. I can clearly recall when the sales tax came into Vermont for the first time. And the state had to revise 2 to 3 times the first quarter, upgrade the amount of money that was coming in because they were clueless about how much money was coming in. And I think Don hit on it. You don't really know who's going to pay that. How do you evaluate what tourism means to this? Well, a great example of that is, according to the most recent statistics I had, tourists paid almost $3 billion of money into our state. Good grief, that's a bunch of money that is coming from out of state.
Well, you hit on it, and there could be no better point made. And I have to, since it's 1%, and since it was the town of Rutland, and I'm familiar, very, very familiar with the town of Rutland and its operation, I pride myself in that. When I first proposed this and it was kicked down, I said, you know, you have no idea how much it's going to raise, but I do because I've done the math. And I said, we're going to make, we're going to be able to reduce our municipal taxes by at least $750,000. Well, guess what? The first year, it was $758,000 that we received in the option tax. And every year thereafter, it's been over $1 million to $1.1 million. Now, think of what that means. Not only is it a revenue to us, but $1.1 million means at 1% that there's $100 million of sales taxable business going on in the town of Rutland. That gives us an idea of just how valuable the town is, and it will give your town an idea. We've covered a lot more today, folks, and unfortunately we've run out of time. Fortunately, this program will have a sequel and a sequel and a sequel. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Neil,
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Terry,
My pleasure. Thanks.
we'll see you next time on Straight Talk.